It's Music Monday, you guys. So we're going to talk about the Grammys for a hot minute, and then we're going to talk about thoughts on the Grammys. So first of all, you know what? I'll start out with a kind of nice sentimental thing here. So Chris Cornell won an award last night, posthumously, and his children accepted the award for him. Chris Cornell's two youngest children, Tony and Christopher, accepted their father's posthumous Grammy Award. And they said that it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. Tony, the 14-year-old, told reporters, including people backstage afterwards, "We miss him so much and saw him work on this so hard. He was always working on his music because it was his passion, and it was really sad that he couldn't be there to accept it." That's nice. I mean, that's pretty cool. That's cool that they were able to accept it for him. And, I will say this. I'll give kind of like my kind of positive take on award shows before I give like my actual take on award shows. For somebody like a Chris Cornell, who was in Soundgarden, and for somebody like a Kurt Cobain, and for somebody like, any type of musician that started out in a genre of music that was very underrepresented, that they never thought would see any kind of mainstream success, there had to be that moment when you get something like a Grammy or something like that, where you're just like, holy shit, this happened. And when you talk to musicians or you hear interviews with musicians from those eras, like Southern California first-generation punk rockers, they'll all say that. They're like, we never thought this was going to last. We never thought anyone was going to care about this other than a small group of people. We never thought we would play clubs of more than 100 people. We never thought any of that was going to happen. We never imagined we'd be playing stadiums. We never imagined that. If you came up in the skate punk scene in the 90s, or the grunge scene in the late 80s, early 90s, or the college indie scene, or the 80s hardcore scene, like, you never imagined it would ever get any type of mainstream success. And some of it didn't. But even the stuff that didn't, I'm sure that, Ian MacKaye, when he was just jamming with his first band, the Teen Idols, I don't think he ever thought he'd still be putting out records over 30 years later, and he'd have this successful company where he has employees who he's able to give benefits to. Like, I'm sure he never thought that. I'm sure Greg Graffin and Bad Religion never thought they'd be helping to fund, one of the most successful indie labels in the country, probably in the world, Epitaph Records. So I'm sure for someone like Chris Cornell, if he would have been around to accept that award, he would have had one of those kind of moments where he would have thought, man, I never thought it would have come to this point. And, I used to live in Seattle. I know some people that were around during the whole grunge scene, and they would describe it, and they're like, yeah, none of us ever thought. And, Kurt Cobain was just a shy kid who would buy guitar strings from me. This is, one of my friends talking, not me. But it was like, Kurt Cobain was just some shy kid that would buy guitar strings from me. No one ever thought, oh, this guy's going to change the face of music. This dude right here. One of my friends would tell me, I used to deliver food to Alice in Chains. They lived in this small house in West Seattle where they kind of had a little bit of space around them so they could just practice every night of the week. And they would just practice and practice and practice. I would show up with the food. Half the time they didn't have enough money to cover it, but I would just let it slide because I liked their music. And they would play a couple songs for me, as a way of saying thank you for the food because they didn't have enough money to pay for it. I have a friend that had those stories about delivering late night food to Alice in Chains. So, the grunge era, no one ever thought that was going to happen. So when you're accepting a Grammy, I'm sure you have one of those moments where it's like, oh, holy shit, who saw this coming? And that's neat. You can't help but think that's kind of neat. On the other hand, the Grammys, I don't quite understand why they're still a thing. Here's why. There's so much music that gets made now. It shouldn't just be the Grammy Awards. It should just be the Pop Music Awards, because now there's so many different circles. There's so many different brands. There's so many different tastemakers. And if there is still the concept of pop music, And that's fine. I'm personally not big on it. I don't even really pay attention to it, to tell you the truth. But that's fine that it's a thing. I have no objection to it. But those are the artists who win the Grammys, or artists that were established years ago so they still have a big enough following. And if you're making music that's meant to be played on the radio, that's meant to get that $1 million push, and it's either $1 million push or bust, you're playing with a completely different deck of cards than somebody who's just, making AAA rock and roll, or making alt country, or making Americana, or making, gritty singer-songwriter, or making, you get the idea. You're just playing with a completely different deck of cards. How do you determine that one is worth the Grammy and one isn't? I feel like you can't do that. So it should just be named the Pop Music Awards. Years ago, a lot of people said the labels were going to just go away entirely. I didn't think that, but what I thought was going to happen, which has kind of happened, was that labels were just going to become these tastemakers. They were just going to be kind of like these brand makers where you trusted a label, and that's how you found other music. That has been true for the most part, but to many people's surprise, some of these corporate entities are still putting out music, which I did not see coming. How are they still putting out music? Well, because they found other ways to dip into an artist's money. Now you get deals that are referred to as 360 deals. What that means is the label doesn't just make money off of selling your record. They make money off of your merchandise and off of your touring revenue and off of your publishing. They found ways to dip into your money as an artist in other ways so that they could stay afloat. And I get it. They're still pumping millions of dollars into these acts. However, they're not even just record labels anymore. They're just boutiques now. It has changed. So I don't see how you can determine who's worth the Grammy and who isn't. Here's some of the winners. Best R&B album, Sex and Cigarettes by Toni Braxton. Good Thing, Leon Bridges. Her, some of this I've never even heard of. Let's see what else. Best Country Album. I've never heard of any of this. Unapologetically by Kelsey Ballerini. Port St. Joe, Brothers Osborne. Girl Going Nowhere, Ashley McBride. Golden Hour, Alright, I've heard about Casey Musgraves, and that's the person who won. Chris Stapleton, Volume 2. What an original name for an album. We're calling this album Volume 2. Really? That's all you got? Yeah! You have like a creative team surrounding you. Volume 2 is the best you can come up with? We know that half the stuff... You know that in the pop country world, half of this shit was just made in a marketing office. Volume 2. That's the best they got. All right. Album of the year. The winner was Casey Musgraves' Golden Hour. I have at least heard of that. Post Malone got nominated. Her got nominated. Drake, Scorpion, Brandi Carlile, Cardi B. I like what Cardi B's been saying about politics. Record of the year. All right, you've seen enough of me saying, hey, I haven't heard of any of this shit. Lady Gaga, I've heard of her. There we go. Song of the year. I've never heard of any of these songs. I've honestly never heard of any. This Is America was the song of the year. I've probably heard it. It was probably imposed on me while I was at my gym or something like that. But I don't know the name. So again, how do you have... I feel like if you're going to have any award shows, which I don't like award shows in general. I feel like they're just kind of a circle jerk. I'm not a fan. I never pay attention, even to ones that I should pay attention to. Also, hey, they do have a best comedy album. Agnostic Holiday did come out in 2018. I was not nominated, so... So there's that. Part of this could be my own bitterness. I was not nominated this year, everybody. I wonder if Kurt Vonnegut ever got a Grammy for like maybe a spoken word thing or something. I don't think he did. He might have, though. Never know. There's all kinds of people like you wouldn't expect them to have Grammys, but they do because they were in some kind of something or other. Well, anyway, let me see what you... Am I wrong? Or Grammy's freaking awesome and I'm just not cool? And I'll do another kind of cool sentimental thing. So... When I first moved to Los Angeles, I was a pet sitter by day. That was like because when I moved to Los Angeles, I got off the road. because I didn't want to be on the road anymore. I wanted to find, comedy writing work in Los Angeles. So I got off the road, kind of started all over again. I was still leaving town to do some college gigs, but I needed to find something to supplement my income. So I was a pet sitter, which was actually really freaking cool. And a lot of my clients had a lot of means, because if you can afford a pet sitter in Los Angeles, you're doing pretty well. And one of my clients, he was a music video producer, and he had this thing where he had this framed piece of cardboard, and the piece of cardboard said, "Anything helps." And right next to that framed piece of cardboard, he had an MTV Video Music Award. And it was his before and after moment, because, and I talked to him a little bit. What happened was he was homeless in Canada. He's from Canada. And he spent every dime he had, because he wanted to do video production. He spent every dime he had getting down to Los Angeles. And he had to hitchhike the rest of the way there. And after he got to Los Angeles, well, eventually that happened for him. Eventually he made a couple $1 million videos. So I think that's pretty cool. And I'm sure when he got that award, even though award shows are kind of BS, there was still that moment where, like, this is one of those pivotal moments where you're like, whoa, this happened. So, I got nothing but respect for, people that have those kind of stories. I think it's awesome they have that moment in the spotlight. I think that's cool. That's the one positive I see in award shows. But other than that, I just think it's a mawkish thing that I don't really understand the point of, especially in something like music, because it's like, how do you measure that? It should just be named the Pop Music Awards. Like that. Like, it should just be renamed that. Because then this is just for pop music. That music which is meant to have $1 million push behind it, which is meant to just be heard by a lot of people, which is just mass-produced music. It's like if you were giving the food awards, where it's like, hey, here's the food awards, here's the nominees, we got, like, McDonald's, Subway, Burger King, because that's what everybody knows. That's what everybody knows. It's like, well, gee, there's this, I can think of 5 restaurants on my block that are better than all those. How are they getting the award? Well, because that's what everyone knows. It's the same thing. You don't hear the food awards. You have different, like, organizations that rank restaurants according to the town they're in, so that restaurants get a fair shake. So that's like the equivalent. To me, the Grammys, it's like as if they had the food awards, and it would just be fast food restaurants that are nominated, because that's something everybody just knows. So it's like, this is the best. Hey, McDonald's won Best Burger of the Year the millionth time in the row. I'm sure all of you in your respective communities, wherever you live, can think of 5 places that have better burgers than McDonald's. But it wouldn't get nominated in the non-existent food Grammys that don't exist. You know why? Because they shouldn't exist. And that's why I don't really think the Grammys for music should necessarily exist either. They should again, Pop Music Awards. Let me see what you guys are saying before we move on to other stuff. Auto-tune ruined hip-hop. But Ron, there are food awards at state and local fairs. When it's localized, that's different. If they did like local music award, that'd be different. Haha. Chip says, shout out to Pim Pam Burgers in Barcelona. Should win that Grammy. One of my best friends just got back from Barcelona. I would have given him that recommendation. Isn't a lot of punk rock the rebel music, like there's a fine line, Green Day, Rancid, Misfits, etc. I'm not sure I understand your question. Isn't a lot of punk rock the rebel music, question mark. Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the punk rock I listen to is subversive in nature, has a message and has something to say. I don't know what you mean by there's a fine line. Like, I don't know what you mean by that. Schultze says there's music everywhere, all over the world. Limited edition Ron Placone record. Hey, there's nothing limited about it. You can go get it wherever you get records. You can go download it off of iTunes. It's Agnostic Holiday. It's available now. It was not Grammy nominated. It was not up for Best Comedy Album of the Year. We'd be having an entirely different discussion today if it was. I would be. Oh, and I guess there are things that rank restaurants on a national level. Some of you guys are saying there are organizations that rank restaurants on a national level. That's interesting. But it's not... All right. Well, maybe my analogy sucks then. Cool. Well, there you go. The Grammys. They're a thing. Who wins? Who wins on the national level? Like who wins those awards that like rank restaurants? I mean, if you rank them nationally based on like what's going on locally, that's kind of different. All right, so you guys are talking about diners, clubs, and stuff like that. I still think it's different than the Grammys. I don't know. Maybe my analogy wasn't the best, but I still think that's a different situation than like if we had the food equivalent to the Grammys, it would be like what I described. Like it would be like, all right, so we got, because it's not based on quality, it's based on numbers served. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the best analogy in the world, but I feel like the principle's there. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and